So welcome back, and in today's episode, quite an interesting one for you all. As you all know, I come from a corporate background where I was previously a project manager, working a typical 9-5 role where generally you don't have the luxury to train and to eat as and when you please. So I think with today's video, what I'm going to do is inform you on how to eat and how to train based on a 9-5 role. So ultimately there's 3 windows when you can train: morning before work, afternoon, or in the evening. So what I'm going to do in today's video is talk you through how I would approach each one of those training sessions. So whether I train in the morning, an afternoon, or evening, and how I would set that up from a nutritional standpoint as well. So I'll dive into the detail. I'll provide some good food sources to have pre and post workout, and just generally provide you with a few positives and negatives of each, as they all do have positives and negatives, and I'll run through that on today's video. So let's kick off with the first example. So this is morning training. So this is training before work. Now I think before we dive into the detail of the nutrition side of things, what we want to run through is the positives and the negatives that this brings. So obviously there's a few positives. Gym will probably be empty, you can box it off before work, and you can relax in the evening, so spend time with friends and family. Now the negatives, and these are the big drawbacks, and if I was training personally from a performance perspective, I would stay well away from training in the morning. So the biggest negative is training performance. Now what you've got to consider when you're training for optimal performance and to progress in the gym, and this is going to be person dependent on their goals, but if you are looking to add muscle, you are in a calorie surplus, or you're at least looking to sustain the muscle, what I would say is training performance in the morning is not going to be optimal, because generally you're not going to be fueled appropriate for your session. You are going to be looking at a quick pre-workout for quick release of energy, and generally your sessions you're going to be flagging towards the end, and then time constraints. So you may wake up, not have enough time to get a proper session in, and then you're straight into work. So I think the negatives definitely outweigh the positives here, and I would say the key drawback is your training performance. If you're looking to progress in the gym, you want to be staying well away from morning training. However, if that is your preference, what I will do is run through how you should set your nutrition up to train in the morning. So if you are opting to train in the morning, what you want to be doing is looking at your nutrition. So if you're training for performance, I would strongly advise and not recommend training fasted, because what you'll find, and generally if you are training performance and you're not eating before your session, is you've not really got the energy to perform. So your training session, yeah, you might put a tick side of that box, but is it going to be optimal? Are you going to get enough out of that session? Probably not. So to eat before a session is always very, very vital. So what I would do is set it up nice and simple. You just want a quick hit of protein, hit of carbs pre, and then post, quick hit of protein, quick hit of carbs. Now meal timings as always are essential. So you want to be waking up, and before anything goes in from a nutritional perspective, you want to hydrate. So you want a good litre to a litre and a half of water, and you're probably thinking, well, why is that? Because obviously with the water intake, that will help with blood flow, it will also help with muscle contractions. So once you've done that, quick coffee or a pre-workout, and then you're into your pre-workout. So a typical food source for pre-workout is you want a good quick release of energy through your carbohydrates, because you're going to be using that pretty soon. So what I'm going to do now is run through a couple of food choices for you that may take you by surprise, that we can eat pre and that we can eat post, and why we're going to eat those. So here are a few of my go-to options for your pre and your post workout. So you're probably looking at these and thinking, well, how can I get away with eating these and still progress? So everybody's goals are different, don't get me wrong. If you're smashing 5 or 6 of these before you train and a full box of these, it's probably not going to be worthwhile and it's probably not going to be sufficient. So what you want to consider is obviously, what is your goal? Is it to gain? Is it to kind of reduce body fat? And then ultimately that will align the amount of these you can have pre and post workout, and then you can specify that to yourself. Now the reason you want these kind of foods in your diet is obviously with carbohydrates, and I'll put this here so if you want to kind of pause this and understand it. Obviously carbs pre-workout and post, they maximise your performance. So carbs help maximise your body's ability to use glycogen to fuel intense workouts. So a lot of people who come to me as clients will come on board and be like, yeah, I train fasted, I go to the gym, I really enjoy the gym, I think it's good, my performance is always good, it's never a problem. But really, when you dive into the detail and when you kind of talk to them and you fuel them properly, a week after eating properly and with the right amount of food pre and post workout, what they'll see is a huge spike in performance. Actually, they'll see, right, with a sufficient two Rice Krispie Squares bars, you're talking 300 calories, you're talking a big hit of 50 gram of carbs pre-workout with 30 gram of whey. That's a decent amount of food to generally give you enough energy to perform to a good standard. And then you move to post-workout, so nice, easy, simple protein carbs. Again, you can go little dose of Cocoa Pops, again, 30 gram of whey. Whatever kind of fits your macros right for your needs. And again, what that's going to do is not only replenish your glycogen stores, replenish your energy. Once you've depleted them, it's going to provide you with the right nutritional food to generally fuel you throughout the day. And then once you've done that in the morning, once you've completed your training, once you've had your pre-workout, you want to be having your pre-workout typically 45 minutes before you train, and then your post-workout once your heart rate's come back down, so typically 15 to 20 minutes. You then set up and you can go into meal one and complete your day at work. So to summarise, that is how I would wrap up if you was training in the morning before work. So here we have the setup for afternoon training now. Now this is a good one. There's plenty of positives, also negatives. So looking at the positives, no early mornings or late evenings, which is nice. Increased mood from the released endorphins during training. And then training performance is going to be good because you're probably going to have your meal one and meal two, depending on what time you wake. And you're probably going to have your pre-workout as well. So you're looking at a good 1500 calories before you've trained, which from an energy standpoint is going to be good and going to see a solid performance. Now, looking at the negatives, time constraints. How long have you got for your dinner? Have you agreed this with your boss? Does your boss know you're going to be training during your dinner hour? Are you going to be needed in your dinner hour? There's a lot to consider here. And then head not in it. So dependent on your job, dependent on how much stress that brings and how much workload you potentially have, you could just be thinking, right, let's get in this gym, let's get it done, and let's get out. And that's not really the mentality that you have, because remember, the purpose of this video is how to progress in a 9-5. So this again is a big drawback, and so is this. But again, I will run you through your setup from a nutritional standpoint. Very similar to a morning, but you're going to be more fueled, which we'll see. This benefit training performance increase quite a lot, so I'll run through that with you. So if you're training in the afternoon, again, all these foods apply. We've added a couple of newbies, so pineapple and frozen blueberries. Again, these can be eaten in the morning. I've just added them to make them look nice and just to give you an education spin on them. So if you are training in an afternoon, making the assumption you're training around 12, 1 o'clock, how you want to set this up is meal one on waking. Again, you want to hydrate as well effectively. Meal two, and then pre-workout. Now, the reason we want this is because the more food, the better when you train. Food's energy. So obviously that's what we're considering here, and we're targeting optimal performance. So meal one, meal two, pre-workout 45 to 60 minutes before you train. Now, the reason we're looking at this panel here is because obviously primarily there's a lot of glucose here, and that's the simplest form of sugar. So it goes directly to your bloodstream. So what we're seeing here is it doesn't have to metabolize, and ultimately that's going to create a better pump in the gym. That, along with good hydration, with another 2 meals, you're going to see optimal performance, you're going to see pumps, you're going to see increased mood, increased energy, and generally training in the afternoon is a better setup than training in the morning. So that would be my preference. Meal one, meal two, pre-workout, good hit of food will result in a good training session. However, the negatives may outweigh the benefits of this. So what we'll talk about next is the evening training, which is my own personal preference, and when I worked in a full-time corporate background, that is when I trained. So now we're moving on to my own personal preference. I did used to train in the evening, found it was very beneficial, just for performance, for general progress. It worked very well for me. So I've highlighted the positives and the negatives, and by far I believe the positives outweigh the negatives for this one. So in terms of positives, you've got higher intensity because increased food. You're probably at by 4 or 5 meals by this point, so you're gonna have plenty of energy to release. You've been at work all day, so it's a good stress release, and an improved mood from the endorphins that you're gonna release in that session. Now, the negatives, in my opinion, are only minor and can be managed. Now, it can have a negative impact on circadian rhythm, so sleep. Ultimately, what you need to avoid is stim pre-workout, so you want to be going for your pumps, and ultimately not training too late. If you're training in the evening, you'll probably want to be getting into the gym at around 6, wrapping things up at 6:30 if you can, if you're going to be going to bed at 10, 11 p.m. And then ultimately, busy gym, which if you're training in a good facility with plenty of alternatives of kit, you're going to work around this, and then mentally drained from work. So ultimately, your mind might not be in the best place from a challenging day at work. But I would say evening training, the benefits: higher intensity, stress release, improved mood. These are by far the biggest benefits here, and will lead to great progress, as like I said, you'll be fed well, stress relief, and an improved mood from the endorphins. Now, if evening training is your option, the nutritional setup is really simple. So dependent on how many meals you've got, dependent on your goals and your phase, it's going to differ from person to person. But generally, say you've got 4 meals a day with a pre and a post workout. Meal timings are really important again. So you typically want to be eating every 3.5 hours to fuel your body appropriately. Probably hitting a protein source in each meal, carb dependent on, again, goal. And then typically your pre 45 minutes before, and again post once heart rates come back down. Food setups are going to be the same here. So in terms of the pre and the post workout that I've shown you, same will apply throughout. And generally what you want to be doing is just making sure that, again, meal timings are consistent. And look how many meals you're getting in before you train here. You've got your meal 1, you've got your meal 2, meal 3, meal 4, and then you're into your pre-workout. Then once you're home and hopefully around 8 o'clock you've got your post-workout, you're letting your food digest, it's not going to affect your cardio and rhythm, and generally your sleep's going to be good because you're finishing all your meals a good hour, 2 hours before bed. So evening training, you can set up your nutrition standpoint perfectly, from the timings, from the selection, and from the food choices. So this is by far, in my opinion, the best time to train, from performance and making sure that you are prioritizing progression as the main purpose of this video is to progress during your 9-5. And I think that is by far the best setup, I would say. Right, so now we've covered all 3 bases, morning, afternoon and evening training. I think it's important to summarize and just provide you with a couple of tips that I utilize during my time in a 9-5, because I think without these tips it's hard to put into place. It's all right knowing what to eat, when to train, and the positives and negatives around it, but if you're not organized, if you don't have the right tips in place, then you're going to fail. So a couple of tips just to reimburse this: hydrate, make sure plenty of fluid regardless when you're training. Hydration is key. If you're average female, 3 to 5 litres. If you're average male, 4.5 to 6 litres a day. If you load that in the morning, again, help with muscle contractions, blood flow, and you're not really going to be having too many bladder movements towards the back end of the day. Meal prep, arguably the most important one. If you're not prepping, you ain't got time to run to Tesco for a meal deal if it fits your macros. You want to be meal prepping, whether that's each evening or whether that's 3 times a week. Absolutely key and essential for progress. Communication. Now, this is one that a lot of people probably watch this video back and think, well, I don't have 10 breaks, I can't eat 4 or 5 meals a day. Now, what I did in my previous background was I communicated with my boss. My boss knew my goals. I was heavily invested in that role at the time. And what I did is, I did it on the sly at the start. So I used to take breaks and just have meals here and there in the canteen. And then you obviously got the odd, not going to say the word, but the odd colleague coming in and saying, oh, you're always in the canteen, you're always doing this. When really they're always outside smoking fags. So it's like, well, all right, if you're having a fag break, I'm gonna have a meal break. But I communicated that with my boss and said, look, he's outside having 10 fag breaks a day, accumulating to 60 minutes of your time. I'm having 2 meals within the day, which accumulate to 10 minutes. So if you communicate with your boss, if you're transparent, I'm sure they'll be on board with you. Then communication, organisation. So again, this and this link, all 3. Got to be organised, got to be meals prep, got to know what times you're eating and plan your day around that. And then consistency and routine. So obviously my first video touched on routine. Having that routine, like I said, meal prep, knowing when your food's going in, knowing when your hydration's going in, knowing when your meetings are at work are all in place. And a good routine, training consistently at the same time, is going to lead to peak performance in the gym. Your body's going to adjust, it's going to adapt, and generally you are going to perform to a better standard. And that was a key take home for this video. So they're your top tips, they're your meal preps, they're your food choices, they're your meal timings, they're your positives and negatives. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like, subscribe and comment what you want to see in the future.